hatina capital to use kuti resources atinawa atibatire alake upenyu.
We need to increase the number of reservoirs that we are drawing water from.
Taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kudisu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe vechokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kudisu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe kana dzimba dzedu dzingadai dziri dzavo mawanzira vanoita dzimba dzavo vanoda kudisu vamwe tigare mumiti dzimba 10 pamunhu mumwe chete vanoda kudisu vamwe.
Governance issues have been a serious challenge in Zimbabwe, especially the aspect of devolution. It was central at the height of political disputes in the so-called old dispensation. Actually, one of the key issues that saw the late former president of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, being impeached in parliament. The new dispensation promised a change. It promised that devolution is going to be rolled out. Zimbabwe's governance structures will be devolved and people will be able to determine their own destiny and how resources in their own communities are used to empower and further their interests. Now, this is the topic that we are discussing this afternoon on this, the situation right now, your prime current affairs talk show in the country. I am your host, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, and this is the situation right now. Welcome back to the situation right now. Now joining
resources akawanda asi hatina capital to use kuti resources atinawa atibatire alake upenyu.
We need to increase the number of reservoirs that we are drawing water from.
chokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kudisu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe vechokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kudisu vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe kana dzimba dzedu dzingadai dziri dzavo mawanzira vanoita dzimba dzavo vanoda kudisu vamwe tigare mumiti dzimba 10 pamunhu mumwe chete vanoda kudisu vamwe.
Governance issues have been a serious challenge in Zimbabwe, especially the aspect of devolution. It was central at the height of political disputes in the so-called old dispensation. Actually, one of the key issues that saw the late former president of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, being impeached in parliament. The new dispensation promised a change. It promised that devolution is going to be rolled out. Zimbabwe's governance structures will be devolved and people will be able to determine their own destiny and how resources in their own communities are used to empower and further their interests. Now, this is the topic that we are discussing this afternoon on this, the situation right now, your prime current affairs talk show in the country. I am your host, Dara Blessed Mtlanga, and this is the situation right now. Welcome back to the situation right now. Now, joining me to discuss this issue, which is somewhat emotive, number of guests selected with their knowledge and understanding of the issues around devolution and their contribution in discussing these issues. Now, we bringing you this program in proud partnership with the Center of Community Development. I have with me a member of the HStvZim, and who's going to give us a brief overview for the understanding of devolution and why we should care about devolution. Thank you very much for coming. Maybe you can just begin by just taking us through why we should care about devolution and a little bit of what HStvZim does.
All right, thank you so much, Blessed. So the Center for Community Development in Zimbabwe has been implementing a project titled Strengthening Citizen Engagement in Local Governance. Now, what we have been doing is to advocate for local reforms in our local government structures. And we have been working with a number of civil society organizations to push for this. What we want is to have a citizen that is on the center of all the development that is happening in their area. And so our understanding of devolution encompasses the notion that advocates for citizens being in the forefront, leading for this developmental strategy that is there. We have the devolution policy, and what we're saying is we need to have the central government extending its authorities and powers to the local governance structures so that we may have the local people being on the forefront, leading and just talking about their priorities and what they need to be done. And so this encompasses also administrative powers and financial. And we've been saying this, we have fiscal devolution that has been happening, but we're not so much happy about the way it has been happening because they're not operative structures that are in place to ensure that this is done in the correct manner. Issues of fiscal transparency and accountability are also an issue. We have the Auditor General's report also reporting that there have been cases of corruption that have been happening in local authorities, but that is not being communicated because some of these funds are also devolution funds. So that is the work that we've been doing as HStvZim. And we are also concerned about how devolution has been portrayed, considering that we are taking this from the Constitution, but when we see what has been done so far, it is far divorced from what is in the Constitution.
Amazing. Now, from the combined Harare residents, I'm sure you are so much invested in these issues around devolution because Harare appears to be one that has been complaining a lot about government interference, central government interference in the operations of Harare. Currently, the mayor of Harare is suspended. I think this is the 4th time he has been suspended. There's been demolitions happening in Harare. There have been instructions from central government, for instance, where Harare City Council should buy water treatment chemicals. Now, talk to us about how this matrix of devolution or lack of it has affected or is affecting you as citizens of Greater Harare.
Thank you so much, Blessed. I think, firstly, going back to what my colleague have just said, what is very, very important to understand around the issues of devolution is that local authorities must be able to give sufficient powers to make decisions. So in terms of devolution, we anticipate that the local authority have power to make decisions. That's number one. I think also number two, legislative power, which meaning that also they can also be able to make legislation in terms of bylaws, municipal bylaws, etc. But again, fiscal devolution, which my colleague have just been also mentioning, is very, very critical. And then I think administrative. So when you begin to talk what you're talking about, interference, those if we see the central government playing an administrative role for a local authority, then it ceases to be devolution. When we begin to see, in fact, what's really happening is the devolution we want is, in fact, the devolution which is being implemented is not the devolution which we want, number one, as citizens, but also as provided in chapter 14 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, because we have seen the increase of the presence of central government into the affairs of our local authorities. So there's a much increase. That's the reason why you see the PDC can start to dictate what happens in town house. It's also even disturbing.
It's not the PDC anymore. It's the permanent secretary.
Permanent secretary permanent secretary for devolution, and But again, even the provincial minister of devolution, again, you hear him talking about we are going to allocate markets in Harare. As who? This should be been, an issue of City of Harare. We understand probably City of Harare will be saying, we are going to allocate markets. But now you see the government now starting to take a role, of local authority. At some point we were laughing to say, in fact, Dara Blessed is the moment when you see a headmaster standing at the gate writing names of students who have come to school late, then there's a problem. And this is what's happening right now. We have seen a headmaster coming when you have a prefect at school, when you've got a head boy, and all those other things. So the central government, they've come from the top there, the ministers, and now they want to become councillors. Things don't work that way. And the perpetual interference has got a bearing on service provision. And at the end of the day, it is the citizens who suffer. Because what is really happening is that those who are interfering, they are only interested in the issues of power rather than service provision. And service provision right now, as you are saying, Harare, we are sinking. We are sinking. Things are bad out there. So we anticipated that through chapter 14 of the Constitution, at this period of time, after the new dispensation, we could have made some inroads in terms of implementation and devolution. We could have seen the less interference of what they call the committees around the local government board, employing. Look, the local government board employs and fires who becomes a town clerk in local authorities. At this juncture, when you talk of devolution, this should be a decision which can be made by the local authority. The local authority are the ones who must recruit and fire. But you see the end of the central government again through the local government board. That's the reason why you see the City of Harare is in debt with the directors who were fired long back, because the local government board could not sit. In fact, it was not constituted. And this now, it is becoming a cost to the city, because those people, by the labor law, they are supposed to be paid. So the moment when we begin to see central government march into the affairs of the local authority, then there's a problem. And that's the problem we are having. This is far, far, far away from the devolution we want as citizens, and this is a bearing on service provision.
I like your analogy of the headmaster standing by the gate. But I would go further and say the provincial education director coming to the school gate. Marvelous, Kumalo, Greater Harare Combined Metropolitan Resident Association. Looks like you have a devolved structure there. But I want to come to you and say, government has insisted that it is devolving. It has said that it is devolving from its ministry level. It has brought in your representatives of the Minister of Local Government to the lower levels of the structure. Your Minister of Small to Medium Enterprises to the lower levels of structure. This is their argument. And they say that while we are devolving with local authorities, we are also devolving as government from central to the lower level structures. Now, do you buy this argument?
Thank you. I'll start with some form of a correction, my brother. I'm representing Harare Metropolitan Residents Forum, and this is a heavily devolved structure and composition. The fact that government is saying it is devolving from the center to subnational governments, we don't buy that, because the structure and nature of the devolution that we want, as explained by the two colleagues earlier on, is clearly stated in chapter 14 of the Constitution. What needs to be devolved is 4 components. There are 4 components. The political, that is the power to make decisions. Then the fiscal, the power to generate revenue. Then thirdly, the legal component, the power to make bylaws and ordinances at a provincial level. Then lastly, the administrative component, the power to implement decisions. That is what chapter 14 entails, in short. So if we then check to say what we demanded for during the constitution making process and what we are getting now, they are totally different things. What we want is not a deconcentrated form of governance. As you explained, I saw a template of deconcentration where the Minister of Local Government would then send representatives from the center to the periphery. But there are people at the periphery who can make decisions. There are people at the periphery who can collect revenue. There are people at the periphery who can make bylaws. There are people at the periphery who can implement decisions. We don't need a minister of state for provincial and devolution affairs to cascade down in terms of bureaucracy and say we have a point person in Chitungwiza, we have a point person in Norton, we have a point person in Epworth. That's not the devolution that we want.
But you argue the issues that you argue, the 4 critical issues that you argue. The Finance Council have the rights to raise money through charging rates and tariffs. You argue about issues of bylaws. I mean, if you just park your car outside, the council will just drag it. They've just basically become a law unto themselves. Is that not?
I'll give an example. Since 2019, 2020, thereabout, central government started disbursing what they were calling devolution funds. And if you check who was making decisions to say, how do we utilize these disbursed funds, it's not the people on the ground who then come up with a list of priorities, but it's actually central government dictating that we are giving you this portion of funds, go and develop road A, road B, or go and buy drugs for clinic X or Y. Yet possibly the priorities from the local community are not on road rehabilitation or on purchasing of drugs for clinic X or Y. Possibly the priority is on water provision. But central government is interfering, as was said earlier on. So there is what we call role duplication within the local government sector. As we feel, we don't need provincial councils, we don't need local authorities when central government is taking over the responsibilities of the provincial councils and local authorities. Recently, which we feel is a political move, we heard government saying local authorities had failed to provide service delivery, and central government was taking over some of the functions from local authorities, road maintenance and issues to do with the healthcare provision. And we are then worried to say, why do we need to be paying a list of bureaucracies on the ground Yet these functions can be implemented by what? By central government. So really, someone is lying, someone is not telling the truth in terms of what we term devolution. I'm glad that Honorable July Moyo is an expert in terms of local governance, in terms of devolution. He truly understands what citizens want when they say they want devolution. But what cabinet and central government is giving out as devolution is not devolution, but some form of deconcentration.
Amazing. We'll come back to you, but from CCGZ, just let us look at the legal aspects of the new position that has been created, the permanent secretary for provincial affairs. So every province now has a permanent secretary. This is executive power present at provincial level.
Indeed, like what my colleagues have been saying, the interference is so huge that it's actually very apparent in these political appointees that are being made. These people are holding offices that are politically based. They're not electorally driven. People did not elect these people, as in the citizens did not elect the people who are holding these offices into office. They are political appointees. And when we look at it, we're looking at just the executive trying to increase its powers, trying to hold power into their hands so much that the local authorities don't have power, the provincial councils don't have power. And so like what Mr. Marvelous Kumalo was saying, we then question what is then the role of the local authority, what is then the role of the provincial councils, because it's just raw duplication. We're just having too many offices focusing on the same thing, and yet we know where the power lies, where the true power lies. And yet the power is supposed to be lying in the hands of the citizens, who are supposed to be at the center of the developmental process, which is what devolution seeks to achieve.
But some would argue that civil society, this is why you have problems with government at the present moment with this coming in of the PVO bill and stuff like that. You are always fighting government for no reason. Is there anything that is not working with the structures that we have?
There is, because what we're looking for is just basic social service delivery and just the respect of our human rights. We need to have sustainable development. When we're not having that, we need to hold the people who are supposed to be giving us that to account. And for us, it is the government. And so we cannot say that we're just doing this out of because it's our job to do so. It's our job to protect the citizens. It's our job to represent the citizens. What we're saying is we need water delivery, we need the roads maintenance, we need also garbage collection. And so it's just service delivery, just basic rights. We need basic rights to be provided for our citizens. And if we don't have that, obviously we'll have to hold the government to account.
Now, your council in Harare has failed to deliver good roads. Your roads, our roads, they're in a pathetic state.
Yes.
Do you agree with my statement?
Okay. Firstly, what I would like to say, Blessed, is what you need to understand is that since 2008, when government took over vehicle licensing from local authorities, that is the time when things went haywire. So, road maintenance to us is remained an unfunded mandate for local authorities. It's not only Harare. The moment when we begin to Hararize everything, that's where we have a problem. Go to other areas, even buses are now even sinking in mud, even in rural areas. Because at some point in time, Murewa Rural District Council could collect vehicle licensing and use it, for what? For road construction and maintenance. At some point in time, Chitungwi is a municipality would pay our vehicle licensing fees. They were paid at the local authorities. But at this moment, when Zinara took away that funding, road maintenance is very, very difficult. To construct a kilometer of a road, you need about $1 million US, a kilometer. And then when you took away vehicle licensing from the local authorities, how do you think it's going to finance some of its operations? It's very, very difficult. And again, we as an association, we are very, very clear on that. In fact, that's the purpose of devolution. We said, in fact, we wrote to Zinara, this is on record. We wrote to Zinara to say, can you share with us the revenue allocation formula you are using in disbursing what you are saying you are disbursing money for the roads? Until now, we wrote that letter, I think it was around April, May. Until now, we would not have a response. And to some extent, we also want to take court action using Section 62 on access to information. It's very, very bad when we point fingers, or we want someone to, like why Science Banker said, it's not Shinda. You cannot do anything. You are giving this local authority mandates, just like even in health, you give them mandates without funding, and then at the end of the day, they obviously they will fail. We are not exonerating again the local authority on some of the things it can be able also to do, especially when they get money from City Park. These are some of the things we are saying. Those things should be disbanded. City Park should become a department of the City of Harare, and the money is collected by City Park used for road patching, etc. The monies which are collected by raking, what you're talking about, we also need to ensure that monies are also used around putting lines in the street, demarcating roads, putting all those road signs. But again, to tell you the truth, using your city parking fees and say you can maintain a road in Harare, I will be joking. Go to Heathcliff, things are just dire there. You cannot be able to use the monies which are collected by the local authority to maintain a road and even right now, the government have started what they call ERRP. They've gone to Mavuku, repairing a road. Zinara going to, you can see there's a board saying road rehabilitation. Zinara going to patch a pothole in Mavuku. So this is the central government. You see, going to patch a pothole, and even not even patching with mud. The same things which even the local authority is saying you are saying is what they are doing is wrong. So this issue around the devolution needs to be taken seriously if we want to take this nation forward. We need also to ensure that Zinara, for example, it must also be able to just deal with the toll gate fees. That should be the Zinara funds. The local authorities should be able to collect revenue, vehicle licensing, and for their own. That's devolution, and be able to use it.
But the bigger population of cars is in Harare.
Yes.
And if all the money of car licensing is collected within Harare, by Harare, means that only the roads in Harare would be better. Those in Karoi, those in Kwekwe, where the population of cars is lower, would then deteriorate.
Okay. So if you look like what my colleagues have said, it's very, very interesting. Go to the Constitution. The Constitution, Section 301, speaks to the disbursement now of your devolution funds, number one. But also we've got fiscal equalization grants, which are supposed to come from the government. In fact, it is written at least 5%. So it's not supposed to be 5% only, right? To share the national cake. So the fiscal equalization grants can be able now to start to deal with other areas, Because like, for example, okay, if you want to say, let's distribute it equally across Zimbabwe. But again, the cars which are using the roads in Harare, how many are they? There are even still plenty, So again, it's not even fair. Let's use the word equity, It's not fair to use the money for roads in Harare to construct them. It's not fair, It's not fair. It's not fair to use money for roads. Like, for example, you might be surprised that even like Bulawayo funds to be used to construct roads in Iguelu. It's not fair. It's not fair. That is the equity fund, the equity grants now come to equalize. That's why they call fiscal equalization grants. They will come to equalize on those terms. So, seriously speaking, these local authorities must need to have that, revenue generation, and we don't need to take revenue streams from them and then expect them to perform. That cannot happen.
I mean, as we had this conversation, I want you to feel free to just jump in and maybe disagree, although not violently, or agree. But I want to come and test some of the things that you have said, Marvelous. The deconcentration of power versus devolution. Are you saying in the current state that we shouldn't be going for council election?
Thank you. Central government is not giving us the justification to continue having those structures. There is no justification as it were. We called for devolution. Then the president, instead of swearing in the provincial councillors so that they start doing their work, already these provincial councillors are in place. They were elected since 2013 and 2018, but they have not been sworn in so that they can start doing their functions. Instead, central government then is extended. The president appoints ministers of state for provincial affairs and devolution, for provincial and devolution affairs. Then we thought that was the end. He comes in again and give us what are called permanent secretaries for provincial and so forth. So we are saying, what will they be doing which is different from that which is supposed to be done by provincial councils and local authorities? So what we have created there are turf wars. People from different corners fighting to occupy the same space. The political appointees from that end and those elected from the other end. But the scope of devolution was to improve on transparency and accountability. And the framework favored elected representatives over appointed representatives, political appointees, because the elected ones were going to be accountable to the electorate. But these provincial appointees are accountable to the appointing authority.
Who's elected? So is it not the same thing?
No, why should we widen the chain when these people on the ground can simply account to those that elect them directly? Why do we need to use a longer route to achieve a same score? So devolution entails those who are on the ground, those with the powers, the four powers that we mentioned earlier on, being accountable to the electorate and not being accountable to the electorate through another elected official, in this case the president. So that you have created a lot of confusion within our local authorities and the provincial councils, to an extent that demolitions can take place in Harare without the mayor's knowledge
or approval. So it's central government giving an instruction, and at the end of the day, council won't be responsible for that. So we have created a lot of confusion. We have created a situation where those who are in office are not accountable to the electorate. And then we have actually fought the intentions that are in chapter 14 of the devolution of governmental powers and responsibilities as a way of improving on transparency and accountability. Would you want to be a councillor in this regime?
I wouldn't want to be a councillor because as it stands, a councillor has no effect. He's just someone who is there simply to get those allowances on a monthly basis and possibly some form of respect, if ever they still have, from the communities that they serve. But in terms of making an impact, in terms of serving the aspirations of the communities, the councillors are no longer able. They are crippled because at any given time they are set for failure by central government through being given mandates that are not funded. He explained in detail in terms of what we mean when we say unfunded mandates. Then secondly, they get instructions from central government, and they are supposed to implement those instructions. But when it comes to a time of accounting now, they are supposed to go and defend central government's instructions, which at times they are not even in support of. So that's the problem that we have had now with our local authorities. There's a lot of road duplication. There are turf wars that are ongoing. Then lastly, the issue of councillors being just there to pursue the interests of the centre or the executive and not service the interests or priorities of the communities that they serve.
I want to hear from you. I mean, I just want to find out what would really be the role of the provincial minister for devolution, and what is their role? What are they doing?
We are also questioning the role, that role. We are also questioning, because when we look at it, we already have the chairpersons, the chairpersons for the metropolitan Harare, for example, or Bulawayo. But we are also having these ministers of devolution. What is their role? What are they doing? What are they doing that is so different from what the chairpersons are supposed to be doing? It's not clear. It's duplication of roles, like what Mr. Vifels was saying.
Yeah, if I can come in there. In a proper devolved framework, we don't need the appointment of ministers for provincial and devolution affairs. And the sad thing is that if we look at the function of the minister in terms of the provincial councils and administration amendment bill, they are the same functions that are given to the provincial councils. Yet the bill then goes on to say the Minister of State is then given the executive powers within the province. Yet the elected chairperson who is supposed to be enjoying such executive powers is just given ceremonial powers. So already issues to do with turf wars will exist, and they will continue to be there forever and ever. So for us to improve our devolution model, we don't need to have the ministers for provincial and devolution affairs.
Mm-hmm. So this is a position without authority that the chairmen of provincial councils are being given?
Yes, they are given simply ceremonial functions just to be there. There are those things, I'm forgetting the name, zvinoshandiswa kumamisha kuvhundutsira makudo, chine chiri chimunhu, those scarecrows. So these provincial councils are the scarecrows. They are simply there as a ceremony to preside over some ceremonial functions. Yet the power, the real power to make decisions is vested in the Minister of State for provincial and devolution affairs.
Now I'm going to come to you and ask, where do you put the blame for the demolitions that we have seen, the demolitions in Bari, the demolitions of people's houses, especially during the rainy season? Government has said that it was just helping in the implementation of court orders that were sought and obtained by local authorities.
Okay. I think what is very, very important, the good word will say who is responsible for the demolitions. For those who have got, if you've got a good track record, when COVID-19 started, there was a letter which was generated that there is the need to take advantage of COVID to clean up. And it was given again a directive to local authorities, if it was across the country. And even if you look at some of the state media, he's saying Gweri is now taking advantage of whatever to clean up, etc., and all the other things. So you will see that the central government is responsible, for because it's a directive. But again, what also we have seen, because these demolitions have come in different formats. I think that is also very, very important to be able to understand. We have got the demolitions which were coming as an order, you know, and I think all of us, we know those who have been even saying that they're going to demolish. And even yesterday, the people who wanted to demolish were saying they wanted to demolish, not the local authority wasn't saying that. But again, you will see that there are also some demolitions. When City of Harare went to get court orders for people who had also settled themselves, and until now, some of the demolitions have not been effected. Those ones we have been following up. Only in Tembwe, Housing Corp, in Budiriro, that's where the demolitions were conducted. But again, when we look at how the demolitions were conducted, you will see that that is the problem. You will see that the issue is not about demolishing; it is about removing these people and putting other people. You know, so then it is to us now they become just displacements, just like what has been happening. Demolitions happened last year in April, and look what happened. Those markets, they emerged, you know, and the demolitions happened, and you go to Mbara again, those markets they also again emerged. We are running away from the real problem. What is causing that? And then at the end of the day, it becomes a challenge where, like what Mr. Kumalo was saying, to say the person who implements want the other person to be accountable on the actions which he is directing. So even as a father, if you say go and head cattle to your child, to your children, you don't blame in that mountain. You don't blame that child that the cattle has been eaten by hyenas when you are the one who have instructed the child to go and head the cattle in that mountain. You need to be equally responsible. So again, leaders, in fact, that's leadership. Leadership is to be able to take responsibility on your action.
If you go on Twitter right now, you'll see the Permanent Secretary for Information, Nick Mangwana, and also the spokesperson of the president under his Monkia name, Jamwanda, taking pictures of refuse and bad roads in Harare and posting them there and say, this is the failure of the MDC Alliance. I just want to understand, are you defending the failures of the MDC Alliance?
As you know, let me tell you the truth, Blessed. As we are the Combined Arrest Association, we are non-partisan. We always tell the truth as it is. Like I've ever said, even if I said to you that we don't exonerate the city of Harare in the conditions of the roads, because also they get revenue, you know, which is not sufficient to maintain, you know, bigger roads and whatever. But again, they get revenue, probably even just to demarcate roads, isn't it? Often even to put road signs in there, they are getting through fines from wrecking cars. They're getting fines from you know, the city parking, etc. So we cannot exonerate them. We also want them to account, you know, the monies which they are using, you know. So we cannot say that it's MDC or whatever. What I can say is both central government and the local authorities have failed the citizens.
But how does that statement work in line with what you have said, that local government has no power?
Okay, so there are some issues. There are some issues, for an example, which are also simple to deal with. For an example, because the moment when we want to put a blanket approach to the things, we will fail to resolve the problem. We will fail to resolve the problem. Because also there are some other issues. As I said, that the local authority collects money for what? For the roads. Not for the roads, for probably for wrecking and whatever. But that money can also be used to do even minor, isn't it? Right? But again, also, those who are collecting a big chunk of money, and then start to disburse portions, you know, without a clear framework of who gets what and who gets what, you know. You see where the problem is. The problem is it just becomes very problem. I would say it's a conundrum. You know, it becomes very, very complex. But again, we cannot see everyone, both central government and our local authorities, besides being to say MDC, ZANPF, whatever, they should be equally accountable on the collapse of service delivery in Zimbabwe. That's what I can say. Because all of them, like, who is the minister, for example? I'll give for example, who's the minister of local government? It becomes the other one. But again, this one, they'll say, who are the councillors? And the councillors also at some point, they are also making wrong decisions. We don't want to come here and try to say, oh, okay, the reds or the greens, but sometimes we need to say
the yellow,
or the yellow, the emergence of the yellow. You know, we just need to ensure that all these structures, as like my colleague said, of local governance, isn't it? They become accountable to the citizens. But again, on the other end, some of the blame which we place on other people, we also need to be clear to say, he's not one. But also in that one, let it be said. So that at the end of the day, we can be able to push our government, to push our local authorities, to put the development priorities further.
But I'll put this question to both of you, since you represent organizations to do with residents. When council comes up with the budget, most of the times it is you as residents who write to central government to say that this budget is just too much. And central government normally intervenes and doesn't approve that budget. How do you expect then local authorities to be able to deliver what you want when you don't want to pay? Like, for instance, council right now is owed lots of money.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to start from the previous discussion where you said the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Information, the presidential spokesperson is tweeting the failures that are taking place in local authorities. Why is he not doing the same of the failures at central government level? We don't have electricity. There are a lot of power cuts right now. Why is he not communicating that to the nation? Why cherry picking issues? So it shows that there is some form of political bickering, which has actually killed our local government landscape. The fact that issues to do with service delivery have been politicized. They are now viewed from a political angle. But the issue with us as residents is we are not worried with who is delivering the services.
You just want the
What we want are quality services that are reliable. If we get water running in our taps 24 hours a day, we don't care whether it is coming from a local authority, whether it is coming from a provincial council, or whether it's Zino. For instance, we now know where water should be coming from because of the challenges that we have had in the past. But if we had water running in our taps, no one would even care to know where that water is coming from. So it is because of this political bickering, it is because of the continued deterioration of service delivery, which have then made us organize, mobilize, and then demand for such services from local authorities, from central government. But in terms of what we want, we simply want quality services delivered. Whether they are coming from ZANPF, whether they are coming from MDC or CCC, that we don't care as citizens. What we want is an improved form of life, an improved lifestyle. Where it comes from is not our baby.
Amazing. I just want us to, just as in closing, offer some of our recommendations and solutions to these problems that we have been discussing about, because I don't think it makes sense to discuss problems and not come up with recommendations. So I'll start with you from the CCDZ point of view, our partners in this show. What is it that we want to communicate to the people, to the government, as a solution that would work for this country?
All right, thank you. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is there's a disconnect between the government and the local authorities and the people. So we need to have amicable relationships among those three stakeholders. We need to have the citizens being afforded and accorded their rightful basic services that they are supposed to be having. We need the Provincial Council's Amendment Bill to be made into an act. It has to be finalized. It has to be debated. We needed to actually speak to the needs of the people. We needed to speak to devolution as it is enshrined in Section 264 of the Constitution. If it does not speak to that, then it is another animal that is not devolution. It is not what we have in our Constitution. We also need political will. It's difficult for us to talk about these issues and then say these are the recommendations and we provide them to the relevant stakeholders. But if they're not then implemented, then this will just remain a talk show. We need to improve how we look at situations and also just stop politicizing everything, like what Mr. Marvelous Kwanda was saying. We're looking at just basic human rights. We're looking at sustainable development. If we are speaking with one voice as citizens that we need just the human rights, sustainable development, then we should be able to progress as citizens.
I'll come to.
Thank you so much. I think in tandem with what my colleague just said, I think now we need people-driven development, and that's also the ideal, and that's the purpose of devolution. Citizens should be able to be located as key, stakeholders, not stakeholders, but stakeholders at that level, and people begin to make decisions. So any framework that throws citizens into the periphery of local governance is not accepted. So at the end of the day, we really need to see the citizen voice in those budgets which you're talking about. Citizens' voice must be able to say, when citizens say something, and those things they are included. That's the reason why you see them going probably with the minister, because some of the things which they say, they are not found in the budget. We need political will to be able to, around politicians, to grab citizens' voice and be able to put it in their documents and going forward. We also need it to be transparency. The use of public resources, that's one of the challenges. People who are in government, people who are in local authorities, they think they are operating in private companies. These institutions are public institutions, and they need to make sure that there are transparency in the way they use resources, both from the center to the local. That is it's fundamental. People must be able to know what was spent on what and where, and we need also to continuously look at the performance of the projects which have been done by our central government or local authorities. Citizens also must be able to be active and start to ask those big questions to say, how did you do this? How did you come to this conclusion? But again, nothing without us, is for us. So again, the citizens' voice, as I said, is very, very important. But also on the other end, we really need to fast track implementation of devolution as provided in the Constitution and align our laws with the Constitution. That's one of the deficits we have. We have legal hangover. We are living the laws of Ian Smith. These are the laws which are causing demolitions. Ian Smith's laws, water disconnections, 1913 water bylaw. Now we are in 2022. We are using 1913 water bylaw to disconnect water, which is again ultra-vires to the Constitution and the right to water. So again, we need to legal reform, our local government reform. We need to reform as we move with time, so that at the end of the day, our governance becomes compatible with the context. Otherwise, if we continue to live in the past, we'll continue to run battles with citizens, because our development priorities and the way we do things will not be compatible with the context we are living in.
Thank you. You pose a very crucial question in terms of what needs to be done. And I will be short and candid. I know it might be difficult for central government to take on board some of our suggestions as civil society. But in terms of placing a record so that even the future generations will say, these people at such a time raised these issues. The first thing is to abolish the appointment of a minister of state and then confer such functions to an elected provincial chairperson, so that there is no infighting, there is no political bickering and so forth. One. Then secondly is the abolishment of what is called the Provincial Development Committee, which also lies within the office of the Minister of State for Provincial and Devolution Affairs, because the functions of the Provincial Development Committee overshadows the functions of local authorities and that of provincial and metropolitan councils. So we need to do away with those two creations. Then lastly, we also need to do away with the appointment of permanent secretaries for provincial affairs, whatever name they are being called. Because if we look in the constitution, provincial councils and metropolitan councils do have the power to employ their own secretary at a provincial level. So if we now have two faces competing to do the same functions, the one appointed by the president and the other one employed by the provincial and metropolitan councils, then who will be doing the responsibilities? Nothing will be done, because a lot of bickering will always be there in terms of it won't be clear. So this has to be clarified. Then as a nation we move on. As I said, I also want to repeat it. I know this is going to be very difficult for central government to take it on board, but we want as civil society this to be on record.
Amazing. Now, this book, the Constitution of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Amendment number 20 of 2013, has been used and has been abused. The other time I remember when this constitution was waved like this, the military moved into the roads of Harare under the name of the Constitution. And President Robert Mugabe, the late, was removed from office. When elections are called for, this book is waived. When any appointment is made through executive means, this book is waived. Even when by-elections were delayed, this book was waived. This is the most used and abused book in Zimbabwe at the present moment. But borrowing from it, chapter 14, its preamble, it says, whereas it is desired to ensure the preservation of national unity in Zimbabwe and the prevention of all forms of disunity and secessionism, the democratic participation in government by all citizens and communities of Zimbabwe, and the equitable allocation of national resources and the participation of local communities in the determination of development priorities within their areas, there must be devolution of power and responsibilities to lower tiers of government in Zimbabwe. It is not me who has said this. It is the people of Zimbabwe. This constitution desired the devolution of power to the lower tiers of the people of Zimbabwe. Now, this was the situation right now. And I, your host as usual, Dara Blessed Mthuli, thank you for joining HSTV and HStvZim on the program, The Situation Right Now, choosing us as your station of choice. Thank you very much, my esteemed guests, and thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and building this nation.
Thank you so much.
This is what we do. This is HSTV.
Thank you so much.